Hey the rulers, we're back for another feature match. Today we have Paul showing off Viga Smash! Finally getting in with Viga and Berserker versus Daltin and his take on Editions Fachion. This session brought to you by Odyssey Games for pre-orders and sealed product, TCG Prime for tons of singles and supplies, Cardo Doko for international rulers looking for product, and fowtlibrary.com for articles and wonderful deck lists. It's also brought to you by our guest lecturer patrons, Vite Ramen. Class is in session. So here we go. On the left we have Paul playing Viga Smash, and on the right we have Daltin on Fachion. Just a reminder, we are coming up on less than 3 weeks away from Force of Will Festival. It is going to be absolutely huge. You are not going to want to miss it. Hopefully we see you there in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The prizes are insane. It's gotten even bigger since what we showed on the screen. You're not going to want to miss it. Starting right off, we have our two cocoons coming into play. Paul actually using Underground Fighting Arena here. This is a deck that is going to make use of a lot of attacks, so you will see that plus bonus gaining in and saying, hey, you can't gain life. We're just going to whittle your life total down and not going to be able to go back. Just a null stone and then a pass from Paul. Apologies for the little bit of a zoomed in camera angle. We are working on improving that for next time. On Daltin's side, the Edition Fachion list is playing it's a similar kind of idea to what you saw from the control deck from Aristella. It's just using daily research to have more kind of utility with those additions, rather than like Awakening of the Winged Lord to cheat in those additions. So that's kind of the big difference between the two decks. Other than that, pretty similar package. The Viga Smash list is relying heavily on the contract to kind of close out games, but it is also making use of things like Sprinting Steward and small quick cast bodies at the end of your opponent's turn to pay his own life points down, so that you can contract easier, but also just kind of flood the board. One of the biggest things to note here is we are going to have to contend with the wall. We're going to have to get that out of the way. At the end of our first turn here, Paul's going to pay 2 and attempt to play Phantasmal Ascendant. He has to hurt himself for 2 because of the Null Magic Stone. We're going to see a Fair Spell come down to just stop that, saying, no, you're not going to get 3 stones going into your turn 2 as the red deck. Don't want to have that happen. We see a pre-upkeep pay 6 to burn, to draw a card. And then Paul does go ahead here in a second. You'll see him pay 6 again to try to burn Daltin with a second Sealed One-Eyed Dragon. Daltin has Barrier. So technically what should have happened here is he should have just drawn a card, because he doesn't have a way to be able to target Daltin for burn damage that will get prevented. The idea here is he's trying to use Sealed One-Eyed to then make the wall easier to pop with something like a Sprinting Steward or something like that. Ultimately, though, it doesn't matter because Paul does not go in this turn to pop the wall anyway, so essentially he's just down a card, which is a little bit of a misplay. And remember that wall gives you Barrier. It's one of the reasons why wall has been played so heavily. Going into Daltin's turn, we see a Magic Stone of Ebon Home come down there. Hard to see, but it is the stone that forces you to your opponent to remove the top card of their deck from the game. It is Gil Lapis's old Pain Stone, just so you are aware, because it's a little bit hard to see in this camera angle. Down comes Magic Stone Research Institute. It is a very popular card being played in these edition lists to be able to ramp ahead stones and make your tiny bodies big to be able to finish the game out. Getting to cycle that Otterrock Dias Memoria into looks like an Amadeus Crystal, so that's a 5-color stone because Paul is using multiple cards. Paul's already on a good spot to be able to pay himself down pretty quickly with those null stones. He can just kind of float will and hurt himself to get down to 2,000 pretty easily. We're going to see an end of the turn Witch of the Fallen Kingdom just to prevent searching, which is an excellent card here against Fachion, turning off daily research. It's one of the other reasons why I think some people have shifted to that Aristella control, is because you have Birth of the Twin Princes doesn't actually search, and so a lot of the things just kind of get around Witch of the Fallen Kingdom. You saw there again, he's going to pay 2, hurt himself 200 with Null Stone just to be able to get himself down to 2,400. Sets himself up to, if he wants to, next turn he could just, float double red here, be at 2,000, and if he had a way to make darkness, he could, like off of his 3rd stone, we can see Contract. Fire Moon Fragment coming down here. Paul paying 200. Or burning himself for 200 off of Nullstone. We see a Sprinting Steward, not cast with Mastery, which is interesting. I think the reason here maybe is just to have another way to pay some additional life. Does pay 800 life here for the Sprinting Steward to add +2/+2 to everyone and swiftness for the turn. He could have just as easily saved himself some will by using the Mastery of Sprinting Steward here. Tap Viga to try to and just pay below 2 grand. I don't necessarily know what the point of using the stone was here. Ultimately, though, we do see a Sealed One-Eyed Dragon come down in response to burn the Darkness Witch out of the way, just so it's one less thing getting pumped up. And then we are going to see a tap out from Paul to cast Extract of the Fire Moon. So he is protected here in the fact that he does have Fire Moon Child to be able to stop it. We see that first Feasting come down to try to cancel the contract unless Paul can pay 2, but he does have Child of the Fire Moon to attempt to force it to resolve. Now, if Daltin has another Feasting in hand here, that would be very, very helpful. You just coin out the second Feasting and can cancel it before Fire Moon Child resolves. Ultimately, though, it doesn't seem like we have that out. And so in comes Berserker, and Paul does hit the secret rare. So Paul's sitting there with, right now, this is a 10/10 Berserker. So one swing from it is able to push through and break through that wall. Even if he blocks with the Feasting, he would still be able to break the wall because Berserker, when it deals combat damage to a creature, will also deal combat damage to your opponent. We see actually the Red Will coming down here off of the contract to cast Inferno. Interesting choice here. Doing the mode to probably set lives to be equal, just to say, hey, I'm going to set you down to 1400. I think I probably would have saved that will because my life total isn't low enough to kill Daltin here. So I thought my thought would have been to save the Red Will. You could do swing. He has to, crack the wall. If he blocks with the Feasting, it cracks the wall anyway. Recover, swing again. And then at that point in time, you'd be swinging for 1200 damage. And still have potential one more will to be able to keep a Berserker alive. Ultimately, though, we do see just the letting it resolve, go down to 1400. And a swing in for 11 because of the Underground Arena. There's a world where at the beginning of the turn, before we even went in, we should have swung with the Darkness Witch, because then this would be 12 even without having it, because we've attacked one time. Just a little bit of a sequencing choice there that could have gotten him a little bit more incremental advantage. We do see the Feasting go in to block the Berserker. This is successfully going to pop the wall anyway, because of Berserker's handy-dandy little ability. Like I said, when it deals combat damage to a J/Resonator, it also deals that damage to your opponent. So 11 goes to the Feasting, 11 goes to Daltin, the 11 gets negated by the wall and destroys the wall, and then we move on from there. Wall gets destroyed, putting him in the perspective lethal range. Next turn, Berserker's going to get to swing multiple times and is going to pretty much be able to guarantee the lethal line there. There is a world where if he had had Darkness Moonchild here in response to the Inferno, we could have potentially killed the Berserker, which would have been helpful because he would have been tapped out and not had the resources for giving him Eternal. There's also a contention here as we see Berserker kind of coming into the format. Keep in mind, these guys are playing Fowfest format. I apologize, I didn't put that in further. So no Origins of the Seven Lands, no Warhorse for either of these decks. There is a contention for the idea of Pointy Hat Witch coming back into the format, being able to just say, okay, well, you have Eternal, I can still target you, I'll just stop all the damage on a 1-drop, you know, with my witch for the turn. That is a potential option for these like quick cast control decks to kind of bring back into the fold. And then it turns into a pseudo Lorite later as we get later into the game. Especially as you consider, again, if they're playing things like Institute, then suddenly Pointy Hat Witch is going to get very large, so it prevents damage from something, and it can trade up into things without actually dying. There's some contention there. We do see a flower coming down here. This is the 1-drop edition that can allow you to rest stuff by tapping your J Ruler. This is a 1-drop edition that has become quite popular in the Fachion decks, usually mainboarded, if not sideboarded, because you get to tap down 2 things. It's very helpful against aggression. Unfortunately, it doesn't do too much against Berserker because of his ability to recover himself, so it's a little bit unfortunate, but it is a tool for if there are other pieces that come down here. Down comes a Mikey to duplicate the Magic Stone Research Institute, so now this Mikey is absolutely gigantic. The problem is, again, though, it doesn't matter how big he is, Viga gets to deal damage to his opponent's face and can stay eternal and attack multiple times. So Viga can very much just be a one-man find the lethal, even through a board of stuff, which is a very poignant tool for aggro that we have not seen before. Just a very aggressive, damage-based lethal from red. So we do get to recover the Viga. We've called stone. We have 4 stones. Even if we get tapped down with the flower, we're very much in a position to be able to close out this game with Berserker. So moving into combat, we're going to attempt to try to use Illusory Flower. Say that's fine. Still going to continue into combat. In combat, we're going to go ahead and try to recover Berserker. And then this is an interesting point here. So because he's getting tapped down as he moves into combat, and then he'll just say, okay, continue going into combat while we're in combat, attempt to recover Berserker. Daltin kind of loses the ability to try to tap him down again. There's going to be at least one swing from Berserker if I'm remembering how the priority sequence will work here. So this is actually really good for Paul. It's like, hey, you burned everything, which is why, unfortunately, the flower is just not a very good tool in this particular environment because of how low Daltin's life total is. So we're swinging in here for 9 because of the underground fighting arena. Daltin says, well, even if I block with Mikey, I still take the damage and you get to attack multiple times. So at that point in time, looking at what he's got available in hand, I believe Dalton's just going to scoop it up. There's not much here that he could do outside of something like a Pointy Hat Witch to be able to prevent the damage from Berserker. Keep in mind that Pointy Hat Witch does say all damage, not the next damage. So Pointy Hat would actually be a very good tool against Berserker. So we go into game 2. Keeping the same Moon Children combinations, I think this is a very interesting choice. I think if I was in Dalton's shoes, I probably would have converted to Darkness Moonchild over Fire. I would have matched. I also probably would have, maybe, if anything, gotten rid of Fire Moonchild for Darkness, because Viga's probably not playing any cancel stuff, so you're not really particularly concerned about needing red to protect your resolutions, whereas Darkness Moonchild again gives you those tap out opportunities like you saw in game 1 where Paul tapped out to try to cast the Inferno, therefore leaving the Berserker completely vulnerable, and could have bought some more time for Daltin. We see that first turn Ebon home into Dalton's first turn daily research before calling stone, which I think is incorrect choice here. We're going to see a Witch of the Fallen Kingdom in response to try to prevent the search, and then we're going to see a Fairer spell in response to that. But at that point in time, that's just going to burn Child of the Fire Moon. So now we get this darkness, this Witch of the Fallen Kingdom. I don't know why we didn't call stone first. I think that probably just would have been better, especially since you're going to try to search anyway. If it's the card you want off the top, you're just going to ship it back to the bottom to try to resolve daily research, and potentially having that one additional will might have put Daltin in a position where he didn't have to burn his Fairer spell, or at least could have kept this Witch of the Fallen Kingdom off the board. That being said, it is still helpful to get the Child of the Fire Moon kind of out of the way now, because now if he has an easier time being able to cancel something like Contract, cancel something like Inferno, because it's very unlikely that Viga is playing any kind of protect the spell outlet outside of Fire Moon Child. So once again, you're going to see them catch, as they kind of talk about it, you're going to see them catch the fact that he can't have been targeted, and so Paul's going to draw an extra card here in a little bit. He still has paid the 12 here, because we're just going to rebuild the board state. Just want to explain it to you when you see what's about to happen. Ebon home came down from Paul, so we removed a engineer, which is really unfortunate. That would have been a very nice free body. We're going to see a feasting get flashed in here. So again, he did have that cancel out to be able to try to win and keep the Witch of the Fallen Kingdom off the board. And an OG card coming in here, Duel of Truth from Castle of the Heaven and the Two Towers, coming in response to the feasting block. Because Underground Fighting Arena has given Witch +1/+1, Duel of Truth will make them 5/5 to Feasting's 4/4. So we kill Feasting and then can go through with our combat. This is when they noticed that he would have had barrier and wouldn't have been able to shoot him with dragon anyway, and so Paul's just going to draw that extra card to say, well, I paid 6 to draw a card, and kind of recycle things there. Read your cards, kids. Just to keep in mind why we're playing certain cards, and be sure to read all of your cards when you get into it. Going into Dalton's turn, we've kind of dealt with the initial volley, but we have burned a feasting here. That was just unnecessary, sadly. We did burn a Duel of Truth out of the hand. We're going to see just get this out of the way now, Sealed One-Eyed Dragon to get rid of the Witch of the Fallen Kingdom, because we want to be able to daily research. I imagine if we're talking about sideboarded games, I would certainly want to have sideboarded in something like Lightning Cave, to just grab that here and slam it down and say, look, you're just not going to gain swiftness. Like, it's just not going to happen. Berserker can't gain it. Sprinting Steward's not going to give it to you. Get this off the board. Get rid of it now. That being said, it looks like we just grabbed an Institute. I do believe we have the will to be able to cast it. It's been very interesting to me to see Daltin do daily research, then call stone both of these times. I don't think there was necessarily an advantage to do it one way or the other than hitting the scry stone. It's like, well, I search, then I scry. So if I want that card on top, I actually get to keep it there. Potentially could be one of the decisions. The sequencing of it is a little bit strange. Magic Stone Research Institute comes down here. We get to sack a stone, get us into another Amadeus Holy Crystal, which is great. We gotta love those 5-color stones. Now the question comes, Paul is at a very, outside of Sprinting Steward, it doesn't look like he has a way to get his life down low, because we haven't seen Nullstone here. The question is, does he have another dragon in hand to be able to burn himself down below to get contract started? There's the Nullstone, so we're immediately at a position where we can just pay for contract by going for a Nullstone. But instead we're going to see Adventurer come down here to another way to pay life. 2-drop 6/7, we can pay ourselves life down to get through, and this is the card that gets feastinged. That's an interesting choice. I think you save it for contract, or maybe just, especially since that Adventurer couldn't possibly crack wall. I don't think there was a reason to play the feasting. And Paul's going to go ahead and say Gradius here after draw, but before recovery to get rid of the feasting. So Paul doing a very interesting job of keeping Dalton's board clear so he's not taking damage, which is cushioning for the fact that, again, he's not playing wall. He actually kind of needs to be mindful of this. So any swings with these characters that have the boost from Magic Stone Research Institute actually could be very dangerous for him. So that's probably why we're seeing this kind of aggressive spot removal come down from Paul. He has left himself pretty open here, not using Darkness Moonchild instead to just hard kill it rather than saving the Gradius for something maybe a little bit more important. Or at least saving the will for something maybe a little bit more important. Second Magic Stone Research Institute, a lot of institutes coming into play here. Drawing a card off of Daily Research, we see another Stone Call. Second Research Institute comes down. Trying to hit as many unique stones as possible. Does look like we see a Water Moon Fragment. I think at this point in time we have at least 3 different stones, so all of your creatures are getting +12/+12, which does mean something like Witch of the Fallen Kingdom or Feasting is getting very huge. Also something like Engineer. This is now a 1919 Engineer that we put into the field for free because of the mastery cost of Engineer. Very strong card. And then following it up with a Mikey, who's duplicating another Magic Stone Research Institute. So now everyone is getting +8, or plus, if this is another unique stone, everyone's getting +18. So, like, this is, again, very lethal, potentially, giving Paul kind of one turn to play around with. Daltin has burned a lot of his cancels already. He does have Wind Moonchild, which is very helpful to be able to potentially stop something like a Sprinting Steward. If he goes for the Mastery cost, he does have the ability to win a cancel war off of Fire Moonchild, but I doubt we see that happen. And then down comes a Neverend, just to have a flying guy for next turn, as well as being able to protect his board state. This is very helpful for him. He can use Neverend to give Wall Eternal, and so because it'll become a fairy tale and all of his fairy tales will have Eternal. Definitely has enough cards in the graveyard. This is a trick we saw off of Toby in the GP of a way to be able to give Wall that Eternal to be able to keep yourself safe. Ultimately though, Paul's going to look at his hand and say, do I have a way to get through this wall before I get absolutely blasted by Neverend in the Covery? I do not. So going into game 3 here, we're having that same kind of start with our Cocoons, getting those ready. Paul choosing to take the play again. First off the bat, hits that Ebon home to go ahead and get rid of a card off the top, hitting a Mikey. This feels very bad for Daltin. I mean, of course, he has to get to the Mikey, but not being able to duplicate his walls, duplicate his institutes, just like already having one of those less in the deck is good for Paul for sure. Certainly puts more resources on the board. See a looks like a Moon Fragment for Daltin here. I wonder what we're going to do. Are we going to try to make a more committed play here? Looks like we are taking advantage of the fact that we're playing against a deck with no cancels, and we see a Mechanical Engineer of Ma'at come out of the right, which is really helpful for this card here in the Foulfest format with no origins. We get to reveal Drywing. This is particularly effective here in being able to say no to the contract producing extra will, which is very helpful, and it gets Paul to be able to recover a stone. So this is a very good card for Paul, or very good card for Daltin to go ahead and get onto the field early, not only because it's a body, but also because it puts in a good position to kind of limit Paul's plays. Before recovery, looks like we are going to see a Dante enters the Game of Gods, letting that resolve. Going to go ahead and pay 1,500 for that as it resolves to draw 3 cards. Daltin trying to figure out whether he wants to let that resolve or not. Keep in mind that Dante enters the Game of Gods would pay at resolution. It's not part of cost. So Paul is getting a little bit ahead of himself, putting that damage in. We are going to see the Fair spell come down from Daltin, and that's going to burn that Fire Child. So he is going to get that to resolve and get to do the draw 3 there. Gets his life immediately down to a really easy way to be able to get it to Berserker range and refill his hand, which is nice. Another Ebon home hitting a second Mikey for Daltin. So Paul probably going to need to rely without having access to the extra will from the contract, going to need to probably rely on some more chip damage, or maybe going in for the Inferno route, paying his own life low. The question becomes if he's playing any kind of life loss stuff to kind of play around wall. We're going to see a Sealed One-Eyed Dragon here, paying 600, getting himself even lower. This is a big risk to me. I don't think I would have tried to go this low, especially since I don't have wall myself on Paul's side. Keep in mind, he could use Darkness Moonchild's God's Art potentially to give Inferno quick cast. That's something to be considerate of. But we'll see whether that plays into a play here. Daltin hitting his own Ebon home, hitting a contract for Paul, and then we do see the slam of the Magic Stone Research Institute. Looks like that's going to go ahead and get us to cycle into a different stone. Autoroctius Memoria, so a nice little green, blue, red stone. Institute getting tapped for an Engineer. Then we'll see trying to copy the wall, or make it so that the wall, if it would be destroyed, comes back to his hand this turn. And then we see a pass. And this is where we see end of turn, finally trying that move from game 1. It looks like we're going to see another Phantasmal Ascendant here, trying to get into going into Paul's third turn with 4 stones, potentially getting that early ramp here. Which could be really bad for Daltin if he doesn't have a lot of, he doesn't have a lot of interaction right now. Again, he has the advantage in the fact that Drywing is there to make the contract feel bad, and he does have 2 additions, which helps against Featsing, or which helps for Featsing. But he only has 1 will available at this point. 1 will and Green Moonchild in terms of interaction to be able to cancel things. Paul doing the Phantasmal Ascendant here is also a very good idea to be able to make it so Featsing isn't as concerning. He can get a 4th stone, play a 2-drop, and have the 2 will to play into a Featsing, which is good play on Paul's part. Looking at the Engineer saying, man, this thing is big. How do we deal with it? It's currently I believe, an 11-11. Already putting Paul into a bad state in terms of potential death on the next turn, if he pays any amount of life this turn. He does have Darkness Moonchild. We just haven't seen that be used very much this game. We see a Dante Enters the Game of Gods being cast here on the Phantasmal Ascendant for the mode to give it the stat block. There's that Featsing. Used weirdly here. That kind of seemed like a weird thing to use the Featsing on, especially since the Phantasmal Ascendant wouldn't be big enough to then pop the wall, so the drain wouldn't even do anything because the damage gets prevented. Ultimately, though, I think that's a little bit short-sighted. And we do see that Gradius then come out to kill the Featsing, and now Paul has free reign for this whole turn. He can kind of go whatever he wants. He's really done a good job of playing through the stuff in the recovery phase as the aggro deck, kind of baiting out some of the control answers, and then going to his line here with only 1,000 life. Or with only 1,300 life, though he is a little bit limited. Those no magic stones are still kind of hurting him right now more than helping him, although he can use them as darkness sources and then use Ebon Home for the other red source. Paul deciding how he wants to play it here. It looks like we are going to see black-red using the stone from Phantasmal Ascendant for the black to go ahead and do Extract of the Fire Moon. We're going to try to contract into Berserker. And again, if we, even if we had the Feasting here, we wouldn't have been able to do anything about it because he would have just tapped out. But honestly, I think I would have preferred to have done the Feasting there and forced the tap out. Then, like, the Phantasmal Ascendant wasn't going to do anything, really. And at this point in time, he'd have a Berserker that's an 8-8 with Swiftness, 9-9 with Swiftness, but then we can just block. And we're pretty safe there. We see a Phantasmal Ascendant coming in here. He only gets to attack, so I guess he only gets to attack once, and that's totally fine. We just let that happen. Phantasmal Ascendant coming in here. We do see a block from the Engineer, and in response, this is actually a really good play from Paul. Down comes that Duel of Truth from earlier with Berserker trying to deal damage to the Engineer. And so what happens is we're going to have to give... Paul passes priority here, which I think is incorrect. You have to, otherwise he's going to lose his Berserker. I think the idea being that he's going to pay also black to give Oh, yeah, there it is. He's going to pay black to give Berserker Eternal, and then Berserker will deal 800 damage to the, I think 900 damage, actually, because things have attacked. We'll deal enough damage to the... sorry, pardon me. We'll do enough damage to the engineer to kill the engineer, and then the damage will also go through to Daltin, because Duel of Truth is Berserker dealing the damage. So Berserker deals damage, which then also gets dealt to Daltin, which then will crack the wall, so that Phantasmal Ascendant's damage will go through here and actually hit him with the wall. We see a pay 6 to go ahead and get rid of the Phantasmal Ascendant in response to trying to give it Eternal. Berserker's going to kill the thing. Going to kill the engineer. It'll crack the wall. And then, you know, he's done a good job of preventing him from being able to take the damage from Phantasmal Ascendant, but now he's going to take the damage from Berserker coming in, taking him down to 21. At that point in time, we pass turn, and Paul is left tapped out with just Darkness, Moonchild's God's Art available. But unfortunately, there's not much. Again, we're in that same kind of position before, where once Berserker hits field, even if Paul tries to, if Daltin tries to play bodies, Berserker can just kill that and hit him for damage as well. So he's got to be really careful about. He's got to get that Berserker off the field and then keep Berserker off the field. That is the biggest piece here. And unfortunately, seeing this red child, green child combination that we didn't, I'd have to ask the guys if they played the decks as is or if they considered sideboarding. Daltin was in a position again where right there Paul tapped out, and if we had had Darkness Moonchild or sideboarded into Darkness Moonchild, we could have killed Berserker in response when it didn't have the Eternal yet, and that would have saved us a whole bunch of pressure. We would have essentially cleared Paul's board and come back to be able to finish the game pretty easily there. This is a big trick of what we see a lot with the new rulers. It's a good example of not all the Moon Children are good against all of the other matchups, and so sometimes you just got to think about, committing a couple of sideboard slots to. Typically the 4 that we see played between mainboard and sideboard are red, green, black, and white between sideboard and mainboard, and so it just taking a couple extra slots to kind of change that starting piece up is probably a smart plan to consider, and this is a good example of that in this match. See a Campanella, the Milky Way Moon. This is going to get us a moon from the deck. Probably going to get the 4-drop moon, because first moon doesn't matter here since we don't have wall anymore, unfortunately. Just have not been able to get that out fast enough to be able to survive. Yep, Fountain of the Oblivion Moon. Nothing to... we can name a non-J-Ruler card, which is unfortunate, because if we could name a J-Ruler card, we could call Berserker, and then he wouldn't be able to untap himself or give himself... Eternal, but sadly that's not going to help. Thankfully we do get to draw some cards, so this is probably just Daltin trying to draw to get into some better answers potentially here. He's just going to get to draw 2 free cards off of using his J-Rulers, because Paul doesn't care about his graveyard at all. and Dalton's kind of confirming that here before he just commits to drawing 2 cards. Drawing a card using Firechild. And then unfortunately just passing the turn, it looks like, potentially. Which is not a great spot for him to be in. Looks like we might just kind of be reviewing the hand and maybe even considering just conceding we just didn't draw into the good answers to deal with this Berserker, because it's very possible with all these, because Berserker's going to untap and is going to be able to attack 4 times with Eternal, and there's just not a lot of instant speed removal in the Edition Fachion deck, so I'd be curious to see kind of what his plan is to be able to deal with this, Viga smash that's coming next turn. It's a little unfortunate. I mean, the driving was helpful. It's almost kind of a little unfortunate that he didn't see the other 2-drop Campanella instead of the Engineer, because if he had been able to do Campanella versus... I'd be very curious to see in the Paul's list, and we'll see it in the deck profile later this week, if he has any kind of way to deal with First Moon plus Wall outside of like Inferno Life Loss. But then if he has a way to be able to actually do that last little bit of damage, Life Loss would have been very interesting to see how quickly that match could have just very quickly gone in Dalton's favor. This is a big example of, again, tech choices and playing tight, but also just natural variance does kind of play into it, and you can see that the matches can go either way based on how those goes. So Berserker swinging in. He's going to just go ahead and try to do his 900 damage because, again, he gets the +1 because he's attacked once with Underground Arena. If he blocks with Campanella, we give it Eternal. Dalton's going to take 900 damage anyway, so he says, nah, just take the 900. That's fine. Go down to 21. Attempt to recover Berserker. Attempt to swing again. We see the block there. Campanella's not big enough to kill the now 10-10 Berserker. He's going to take the 10, recover, and we swing it again for lethal. And so that is the match. Thank you guys so much for watching. The Viga Smash list will be up later this week. And until next time, this is DMO73 saying, class dismissed.